Hi, I'm James Lehman, author of the Total Transformation Program. Over the years, one of the primary questions that I've gotten from parents is how to use consequences effectively. You know, often we say that kids need to be held accountable for their behavior and that we need to set limits on kids, and also we can use things to motivate kids. And consequences should be effective in those three areas. They set limits, they motivate, and they hold responsible the individual kid. And during this video, I'm going to talk more about how we set consequences, what our theory is about consequences, like how we want them to be effective and what we want the kid to get out of it, and also how parents can learn to use different consequences effectively so that when they're stuck in situations that often happen with kids, they have other options and other ways out. Let's talk a minute about what consequences are and what they're designed to accomplish and what they're not. Let's start with the premise that you can't punish people into good behavior. If that were so, we'd have very well-behaved schools and very well-behaved families, and we wouldn't have much trouble because parents are pretty good at punishment, you know, and they come up with punishments. Unfortunately, those punishments don't work. And they don't work because they don't have a learning experience built into them. If a parent is retaliatory by yelling or screaming or cursing or laying out some severe punishment, you know, that happens sometimes. Parents fall into those traps. Certainly, it gets so frustrating when dealing with kids with the same issues over and over that it's easy to want to retaliate and it's easy to want to punish. But the problem with that is that it's not effective. That retaliation and punishment doesn't help the situation. It doesn't change the behavior. In fact, there's studies that show that it deepens it. You know, that the kid gets resentful, that the kid gets angrier. And so there's no motivation on him to change his behavior. In fact, the whole idea of punishment and retaliation is the concept that I make that kid feel smaller to show him how powerful I am. And we know with kids, if they feel powerless, they do things to be more powerful too. Like do things to spite you or get in your face or raise their voice or curse at you or go break something in the home or don't respond to you. All right, so we know that kids don't respond to the feeling of powerlessness the way parents think they do or would like them to. So the idea is not to make that kid feel powerless by retaliating or by being over-punishing. The idea is to give a consequence for the judgment that led to the behavior, with the idea that the kid is going to learn from the consequence not to do that again, but also the consequence is going to teach him how not to do it again, that there's something attached to it. You know, a punishment is just bing, don't do it again. A consequence should be, don't do it again, and here's how. Here's how I'm going to help you learn this, or here's what you can do about it, or here's how you can make it better. And it's a very important part of a consequence that you construct it, you think of it, about a learning experience. What do I want this child to learn? You know, this child isn't doing his homework. What do I want him to learn? All right, and how am I going to get him to learn that? Well, I want him to learn the importance of doing his homework. Well, how do I do that? Well, I make it important to him. Right now, his homework's important to me, but it's not important to him. So I make it important to him. How do I do that? Well, I take something else that's important to him and I connect it to the homework. So if his phone is important to him, then he earns his phone by doing his homework. All right? If video is important to him, then he does his video after he gets his homework done. And the homework is checked by me, the parent, to make sure that it's done in you know, a reasonably coherent and neat way. And it's not just some slop he throws down on paper to kid me as a parent or himself or his teacher that he got something done. So what we do is we take things that are important to that child and we pair them, we hook them up with the thing that's important to us. And look, isn't that the way your own job works? I mean, money is important to us because it pays for things. And so, you know, the employer pairs that money with the things he wants us to do. And not only that, he usually pairs it up with money by the hour so that it's managed in these discrete little steps. I get paid by the hour. If I put in an extra hour, I get more money. That's very important because my employer doesn't pay me by the month. And so when we ground kids for a month, or we take their phone for a week, we're really losing our currency. Don't forget, that phone is your money. That phone is what the kid works for. That video game is what he works for. That time on Saturday night out with his friend is what the teen works for. This is what they're working for. This is what they value. So that's what we have to pair up. We should look at every 3 hours of phone use as $1. Okay, so if the kid doesn't do something, we take $1. You can't use the phone for the next 3 hours, all right? That way the kid, has a goal then, all right? The way that I like to do that is you can't use your phone until you don't curse for 3 hours. Give me your phone. You can't use your phone until you spend an hour at the homework. Let me have the phone. And so that way it's very connected to the task on hand. Don't forget, we want consequences to be task-oriented, not time-oriented. If you ground a kid for 30 days, that kid is just doing time. What does he learn? Really nothing. That it's important to be sneakier. It's important to fool you better. But if he's grounded until he accomplishes certain tasks, until he brings his grades up to a B again, until he goes to after-school practice like he made the commitment to. We want this kid to accomplish tasks. The reason for that is that the part of the kid's brain that is accomplishing tasks is growing. So not only am I lost my phone until I don't curse for 3 hours, but the part of my brain that screens out the cursing is doing push-ups during that time. It's getting stronger. I'm using that part of my brain. And the more we get kids to use certain parts of their brain, the stronger those parts of their brain get. It's very important to understand why we want kids to learn how to solve problems, why we want kids to learn how to accomplish things, why we want kids to learn that there are certain consequences in life and that there are certain tasks that those consequences imply. When we think about constructing a consequence, I think we ought to look at what we have available to us to hold kids accountable. And we ought to develop and be creative about a menu of consequences. So on this menu, we don't have take the phone. We have take the phone for an hour, take the phone for the rest of the night, take the phone for 24 hours, take the phone for 2 days, take the phone for 3 days. I think 3 days is a maximum. I think that after 3 days, the kid becomes desensitized. Go to bed an hour early, lights out an hour early. When I say going to bed, I mean no video games in the room, no electronics. You can read if you want, but that's it. You're in your room, reading in quiet time. Going to bed an hour early, going to bed after dinner. If I tell you a consequence should be to take the phone away from an hour, don't get fooled by the kid who says, I bought the phone myself. All right, it's not his phone. You're signed on that service. He can't use that phone without your permission. You make it really clear. If you don't give up that phone now, tomorrow I'm shutting it off until you agree to surrender it and work this through with me. You call a phone company, believe me, as the adult, if you shut it off, it's getting shut off. And I've heard adults tell me that they call a phone company and shut it off for 3 days, and the phone company goes along with it. They just shut off the service for 3 days. They shut down the service. They tell them why. It's not take video games for a week. It's take no video games till bedtime. No video games for the rest of the night. No video games till after dinner. No video games till your homework is done. Supplement that out. I suggest parents have a certain limit of video games that they allow kids to play anyway, so that there's an hour a night or an hour and a half a night that's your free time. And on your free time, if you choose to use that video game, that's fine. But any extra, you're going to have to earn. Parents should have a structure in their home at night that says this is free time, this is chore time, this is homework time, this is get ready for bedtime, and to have it kind of organized in a general way like that. Many parents will say, oh, that's too rigid. But those are the parents that don't need it, all right? If you're having trouble getting your kids to do their chores, to clean their rooms, to do their homework, to take time for dinner, that's because you need to structure it more. Not every family needs the same structural setup, but there are a lot of families dealing with kids who have problematic behaviors, who need structure so that everybody's got something to relate to and everybody's got a schedule to be accountable to. In a Total Transformation program, I teach parents a technique called the alternative response. And it's a guided interview in which they discuss problems with their kids in a non-emotional, hopefully constructive way. And part of the alternative response, you come to a point where you're asking the child, what are you going to do to make amends for this? Because I'm sorry is not an amends. And I want to think about amends. You know, the word amends in a dictionary means right the wrong, make better. And I think that we want to think about kids who do abusive things, who violate other people's privacy or violate other people's property, on how are they going to right that wrong? You know, many of these kids, when they apologize, they say, I'm sorry, but, and there's a blank. And you can listen for it. And it usually is, I'm sorry, but it was your fault. You know, I'm sorry, but he was looking at me. I'm sorry, but he said that. I'm sorry, but this. I'm sorry, but that. And that's really not saying I'm sorry. That's saying I wouldn't have done it if you didn't push me. So I'm sorry is not enough. And in fact, it's okay to say I'm sorry, but what we really want is for kids to make amends for the wrongs they've done others and make that part of the consequence process. If you don't do your chore, all right, before mom gets home and your brother does it, when mom comes home and she discovers that, I think what you have to do is figure out how, not only what went wrong, but also how the kid is going to make up for it to his brother who had to do his chore. I mean, it's like if somebody has to set the table, then you get his brother to do it because he's refusing right now. He's acting out. Well, how do you pay that back? Because it's not only I'm sorry, because the kid got out of setting the table. And really, you don't ever want kids to get out of responsibilities by acting out. They should always come back and make it better. They should always do something that's going to make it right. Again, not overdo it, not overmake it, just make it right. And I think it's important for kids to learn how to right the wrongs because, you know, that's how adult life is. If I say I'm sorry, that's not enough for people. They want to know what I'm going to do about it. If I make a mistake at my job, my bosses want to know, what am I going to do to change it next time? What am I going to do differently? And then how am I going to make it better? And how am I going to fix it? And I think we should start teaching kids that very early in life. So, because that's part of the problem solving, you know, process is figuring out what I did wrong and then what I can do to make it better. Again, our job is to teach kids how to solve complex social problems of how to get along, how to treat other people, how to be treated, how to meet responsibilities, and the amends is a solid part of that process. In the Total Transformation Program, we talk about the difference between effective parents and ineffective parents, and how effective parents operate in a way that their kids learn how to solve problems, and that their kids learn how to move on and keep moving ahead in their problem-solving skills, and that they can deal with social situations successfully, and that they learn how to respond to limits appropriately. And then we talk about ineffective parenting. And the thing about ineffective parenting is that kids, not only is the parenting ineffective, but kids learn ineffective things as a result of it. And I look at consequences the same way, you know. There's ineffective consequences and there's effective consequences. And kids learn from effective consequences, and kids also learn from ineffective consequences. But of course, what they learn from ineffective consequences is the wrong lesson. You know, it's often how to mimic and mirror the parent who's overreacting or yelling. You know, that stuff isn't effective. It happens. We're not talking about parents being saints. We're talking about parents being effective. So yelling happens, bitterness happens, punishment happens, people lose their temper, people yell, people react, people overreact, people double and triple consequences, but none of that's really effective. It may make you feel better at the moment. You know, parents deal with a lot of frustration when the kids come home late at night for the 5th time, or they won't clean their room, or they keep getting notes from school saying the homework's not done and the kid's lying to them and saying it's done. That's very frustrating as a parent. You can't yell at the kid and be effective at the same time. You can yell at the kid, then go away. But when you come back, you better have an effective plan, because that's the only thing that's going to help that kid change. Yelling has never changed anybody. Punishment has never changed anybody. It just doesn't happen that way. It's consequences that you learn from. Things that are a consequence of your bad choice or of your good choice. And then you learn from each of those. Because parents learn better from visual aids, what I'm going to do is show you some ineffective role plays and some effective role plays. And at each one, I'll lead the discussion on what was helpful and what was not helpful, what was effective and what was not effective in the parent-child interaction. You know, in these role plays, you may see yourself, you may see your kids, but that's okay, because we're here to critique ourselves and look at ourselves so that we become more effective parents. Let's begin by looking at one of the most common behaviors that parents have to deal with, adolescents not coming home on curfew.
Jenna?
I know. I can't believe she said that.
Jenna, you're an hour late.
I'm gonna need to call you back. Okay, bye. What?
I told you to be home at 9 o'clock. It's after 10.
The movie ran late and Sarah had to bring Melissa home first.
I don't care. You need to get dropped off first.
Whatever.
You are going to learn to come home on time once and for all. I am sick and tired of you coming home late. 30 days, you come straight home after school.
Are you kidding me?
No yearbook, no basketball, no friend's house. You come straight home after school.
I hate it here.
Maybe you saw yourself in that role play. Maybe you saw your kids, you know. That's a behavior and a conflict that parents have all the time, all across the country. And what we saw was not bad parenting, but what we saw was ineffective parenting, using consequences ineffectively. You know, she had an hour to think about this kid's coming home late. And she used that hour to stew and take it personally and get frustrated and angry. She could have used that hour planning how she was gonna teach the kid to come home on time, and what would teach the kid that? Look, grounding kids from after-school activities for a month doesn't teach them anything. And in fact, we want kids involved with the yearbook. We want them involved with sports. That doesn't help them. Certainly, it makes them feel like we're in control and powerful. It gives us that feeling for just a second. But really, if that kid comes home right after school, what's gained? What is she going to do there? We want a parent to think more clearly about what's going to help this kid learn, and also what fits the crime, what consequence fits the mistake. I mean, here you have a mistake, a kid is an hour late. You know, she's not complying with the limits that were set on her. Kids do that. How can we have a consequence that fits that particular behavior, doesn't go way overboard, and gets that kid motivates that kid to solve that problem differently the next time?
Jenna?
I know. That was so lame.
Jenna, you're an hour late.
I'm gonna need to call you back. Okay, bye. What?
I told you to be home at 9. It's after 10 o'clock.
The movie ran late and Sarah had to bring Melissa home first.
You know the rules here. You need to plan it a little bit differently. You need to get dropped off first. Now, you were an hour late tonight, and so next Friday, if you come home an hour earlier at 8 o'clock.
Whatever.
Let's look at how the mother handled it in this role play. Apparently, she's upset, but she's holding herself together. You know, it doesn't seem to me like she's taking it as a personal attack upon her, that Jenna's coming home late, and that it's not a thing between her and Jenna. It's a thing between Jenna and Jenna's commitments. This is a thing between Jenna and her responsibilities. This is not a parent-child conflict. It's a child responsibility conflict. And I think the mother tries to keep it that way. I really like the way that she connects the consequence to the problem. You know, the problem is you came home an hour late. That means next week you come home an hour early. As a parent, you might be saying, big deal. Well, it's a start. Then after that, it's 2 hours. Then you're stuck for Friday night. Then we're working on Saturday night. In other words, we're taking these little incremental steps, except instead of taking everything at once. When you take everything at once, what happens is you desensitize the child. You make it a parent-child conflict. It's Jenna's responsibility to get home. As a parent, you have a right to expect compliance with that, but it's her responsibility, and if she doesn't comply, then she's got to deal with not meeting her responsibility, not with not dealing, with disappointing you as a parent. I'd also like to comment that it's very important that the parent not get sucked into the kid's low-level obnoxious behavior. So that you can see Jenna showing emotion, being upset, talking down to her mother. At the end, she says, whatever, and walks out of the room. It's really important for parents to understand that when you give your kids consequences, they don't like you. They don't like it. A big trap parents fall into is I'm going to give you the consequence, and then I want you to tell me that you still like me or still love me. That's unnatural. It's weird, you know? Let the kid be angry. Let her deal with her own anger and frustration. Don't get sucked into those side arguments. We dealt with the curfew. Now we move on to the next thing. In this video, we're going to look at what happens when a kid becomes verbally abusive.
Ryan! Ryan! I told you to pick up your clothes and towels. I am not your maid.
God, why are you such a bitch?
Hey! I am sick of your mouth. You go to your room. Now! Ryan, you're in your room. Take out the earphones. You're in your room for the rest of the night for talking to me that way.
So you have another situation here where there's a parent who's frustrated, tired of telling her kid to do things over and over. And, you know, she responds to him by yelling downstairs to him and screaming at him. You can see the frustration. You can hear it in her voice. By the way, so can he hear it in her voice. And then, you know, she's giving him instructions and asking him questions. And he's not even there. He's walking up the stairs. Then he becomes verbally abusive. And make no mistake about it, if a kid curses at you or calls you a name, that's verbal abuse. Don't kid yourself, all right? Verbal abuse is when somebody disrespects you and curses at you, especially if it's someone for whom you're supposed to have authority over. When he becomes verbally abusive, that becomes the priority. Now, mom, as a reaction to that, sends him to his room, telling the kid he's in the room for the night. And while he's still listening to his iPod, is not very effective. It doesn't help the kid learn from what he did. It has nothing to do with the verbal abuse, and it doesn't right any wrong. It doesn't make any amends. I mean, the questions I have are, the next time the kid wants to curse you, what is he going to do? What is he going to do with those feelings? The problem is not why he cursed at her. The problem is what's he going to do differently next time. The effective consequence gets him to look at that and to make some statement or do some work around that. So let's say you're that kid and you're sitting in a room and you've just cursed at your mother and you're annoyed with her and angry and frustrated with her, and she comes into the room and she tells you to pay attention, and you turn around and you only take one plug out of the earplug. What are you saying to your mother? And, you know, this mother is so encapsulated, still so angry, she can't pick up on that. All right, so she's just saying at him what the consequences are for what he did. There's no involvement with him. He's not forced to learn anything. He's not forced to make amends for anything. He's just in his room for the rest of the night, listening to his iPod and playing with his computer. That may be a consequence, but it's not effective. He doesn't learn anything from it.
Ryan, take out the earphones. Give me the iPod. You are grounded to this room until you write me a letter of apology and you explain to me what you will do differently the next time you feel like cursing at me.
In this scenario, the mother sends him to his room while she can organize herself. She's been verbally abused. This may or may not be the first time it happens, but she's taken a minute to think about, what do I want to accomplish here? And she goes into the room, and the first thing she does is she gets him to unplug the iPod. And when he doesn't pull out the other plug, she just says, hand me the iPod. That gets his attention, you know, like when that kid is sitting there still listening to music with one plug in his ear, and many kids do that, this is a sign that this is no big deal to the kid, and he's still going to disrespect you. So taking the iPod is very good. She calmly tells him what the consequence is. that he has to tell her in writing what he's going to do differently the next time he has those feelings. Because let's face it, kids feel like calling their parents names. People feel like calling other people names all the time. People feel like being disrespectful. People feel like being abusive. But the vast majority of us don't. We do something different. We deal with our feelings maturely. And so what she wants him to think about is how is he going to deal with his feelings more maturely? And he's got to write that into a letter for her. And believe me, when the letter's done, he reads it to her. He just doesn't give it to her. He sits down and he reads it to her, and she processes it with him and questions him about it. So this way, he's really held accountable in a pretty thorough way, and that it becomes a very serious matter, and that he has to think about what he's going to do differently next time. That, to me, is a much more effective way of dealing with the verbal abuse. Now we're going to take a look at a parent-child situation involving homework.
So, Jenna, I got an email from Mrs. Wright, your geometry teacher. She told me you didn't hand your geometry homework in, you didn't do it.
She gives so much homework. There's like no way I can get it all done. I'll do it sometime this weekend.
Oh, you'll do it this weekend, all right, because you are not going out.
Mom, it's just stupid geometry proofs. I can get them done tomorrow morning.
No, you'll get them done this weekend because you are not going out on Saturday or Sunday.
Are you kidding me? That is so unfair.
I don't care if it's unfair or not, you're getting your homework done.
Now, in that role play, what we see is a mother who gets frustrated about the homework, and then she escalates the situation. She gets louder, she gets more demanding, she gets more threatening, and you know, the kid makes the usual kid excuse, they do it too much, I didn't have enough time, and then this parent starts reacting and winds up overreacting. And this becomes a problem then between the kid and the parent. And that's really not what you want to do in these kind of functional situations. It doesn't seem like the parent has any kind of goal in mind of what she wants to accomplish. She got an email from a teacher. She had plenty of time to think about this. It seems to me she didn't use that time to come up with a constructive consequence of how she could get the kid to take more responsibility. You know, the problem here is not that the kid was disrespectful to the parent. The problem here is that the kid's not taking responsibility for her schoolwork, and it's her responsibility. This shouldn't be dealt with like a parent-child problem. This should be a child responsibility problem where the parent is actually the limit setter and the coach. The parent is there to say, as a result of your inaction, you won't be able to do this, but also a coach of, so listen, let's get started, let's do it. You know, whenever you take something away from a child, your job is to help them get it back. I mean, that's the whole goal. Where do we want her this weekend? We want her outside doing things with her friends. We want her having fun. We want her work done, and then she starts to play. But we don't want her playing until her work is done. And as far as I can see, this parent did not accomplish that goal.
Jenna, I got an email from your geometry teacher, Mrs. Wright. She said you didn't do your homework, you didn't hand it in.
She gives so much homework. There's like no way I can get it all done. I'll do it sometime this weekend.
You know what the rules are here. This isn't the first time this has happened. You've got to get your homework done before you can go out on Friday night.
I'm supposed to meet Sarah in an hour.
Well, go get your homework done and you still can. I'll check on you in 15 minutes.
Here the parent shows a lot less frustration and emotion and really deals with it like a business deal. And certainly a lot of consequences should be dealt with like it's business. Not emotional, not relational, but business. Here's the business. You didn't follow this rule. This is the consequence. Let me help you get it started. So the parent says, look, you didn't get your homework done. And the kid says, well, she gives too much homework. The kid gives all the excuses again. But this time the parent says, well, you know the rules around here. You got to have your homework done. Now, the parent then is taken out of the picture emotionally, and it's the kid dealing with the rules. And remember, compliance with rules are a kid's responsibility. You know, that's the deal. It's our job as parents to set up rules and structure to keep them safe and help them learn. And then it's their responsibility to follow that. And if for some reason they decide they don't want to follow a rule or they don't think something's unfair, it's their responsibility to sit down and talk with you about it. If they want to stay out later, it's their responsibility to talk to you about staying out later, not just staying out later and then talk about it afterwards. So there are ways that kids can negotiate this thing. I really like when the mother says, listen, if you want to go out this weekend, get started now. She's coaching her. She's pushing her along. That's called hurdle help. She's helping her over her anger and to her functioning. So the kid's frustrated and angry. What do you mean? I'm going out in an hour. Well, then get started now so you can get it done. And I really like the way the mother says, I'll check on you in 15 minutes. Follow-up is very important to any kind of task-oriented consequence. When you have a kid that's going to be working on homework, when you have a kid that's going to be finishing some task, it really is important to let them know that you're going to check in on them in 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And when you check in, it's really important that you be positive in your comments and supportive of them. And if they're still angry, that's their problem. You walk away. Their weekend doesn't start until their work is done. And this parent has an effective way of making that happen. Let's take a look at how a parent deals with chores and a manipulative teenager.
Ryan,
What?
didn't I ask you to unload the dishwasher?
I don't remember.
Don't remember? Yes, you remember. Why did you make your brother do it?
'Cause he's lazy and he never has to do anything around here.
You go tell him that you are sorry. Right now.
Now, in this video, we see a parent who tries to identify the problem, but doesn't give a consequence related to it. The problem is that this teenager was manipulative. He didn't do his chore, and then he manipulated somebody else to do it. First of all, the parent says, why? Don't ask kids questions that start with why. Because what you're doing is asking for excuses. It's amazing. I've seen it happen in my office in family sessions. The parent will say, why did you do that? The kid will give the reason. The parent will say, I don't want excuses. But that's what why asks for. So I think keep why out of it, especially if you're dealing with teenagers and especially if you're dealing with people who are manipulative. Focus on what? What happened? That's the question you ask yourself. He had a chore, he didn't do it, he manipulated his brother to do it. And that's what we have to deal with. Also, we have to look at the fact that the kid's looking at his mother like she's a jerk. You know, she says, go say I'm sorry, and he looks at her like, huh, you know, what is that all about? And the thing is that I'm sorry is the most ineffective thing you can get a kid to say. Because again, they don't, you know, what they do is they say, I'm sorry, but I forgot. And I bet this kid uses I'm sorry a lot with his mom because it sounds to me like I don't remember, I got somebody else to do it. He's kind of the excuse maker, and excuse makers tend to say I'm sorry to end the situation. They never take responsibility. For them, I'm sorry is taking responsibility. But in effective parenting, I'm sorry doesn't mean anything.
Ryan,
What?
I thought you were going to empty the dishwasher tonight.
I don't remember you telling me that.
Well, not remembering is not going to solve your problem. Your brother did your chore, so now you need to make it better for your brother. What are you going to do?
I don't know what that means.
Okay, well, you didn't do your chore, so there's no TV tonight until you have done your brother's chore. And $1 of your allowance is going to your brother as payment for doing your chore.
In this scenario, you see that the mother is much more effective. First of all, she doesn't let him get away with, I don't remember. She also doesn't start an argument. She just says, not remembering is not going to solve your problem. I think that's beautiful. She's putting the problem back on the child. The problem is you didn't do your chore and you manipulated your brother to do it. I don't remember is this kid's first, defense. And she doesn't let him get away with that. She says, I don't remember is not going to solve your problem. You're going to have to do your brother's chore. She doesn't ask him why. She doesn't get into that. It's irrelevant, and it's only going to start arguments. She goes right to the solution. The response to that is you're going to have to do your brother's chore because you manipulated him into doing your chore. And not only that, but you're going to pay him for doing your chore. And so that there's a cost associated, because if he does his brother's chore, then they're even. But even doesn't give him any cost at all. And so what what she does, which I think is really important, is she assigns a cost to that. She says, I'm going to give your brother $1 of your allowance for doing your chore for you. And it clearly links the kid's meeting his responsibilities with the allowance that he gets. He's being asked to right the wrong. All right, you wronged your brother by manipulating him, because if it was kept his way, his brother would do 2 chores and he would do none. You manipulated your brother, you wronged him, and to right that wrong, we don't care if he's sorry or not, to right that wrong, you have to do this. And I think that that's what makes this an effective consequence. So let's look at how a parent deals with an unresponsive kid in a dirty room.
Adam, I need to talk to you about your room. Take that out of your ear. Yeah. I need to talk to you about your room. A pigsty, and I told you to pick it up when you came home from school. Do you remember that?
I'll get to it.
That's all you have to say, you'll get to it. You were supposed to already get to it, so I wouldn't have to walk into it when I came home from work. You know, I work, Adam, can you look at me? I work, I have to pick up after you. I can't do it all. There's no TV for you tonight.
I don't friggin' care.
You don't care? Hey, why don't you sit up in that pigsty of a room and see if you don't care? And don't think you're watching TV.
Now, in this scenario, we see the parent trying to deal with the kid, and he obviously doesn't care. He could care less. Here's a parent who's trying to reason with him. I work all day. I can't clean your room. He's not in a reasoning mood. What he hears her saying is, oh, you're so powerful. Oh, you're so big. Please do what I'm asking you to do. And of course, he's a teenager. He's saying, screw off. I don't want to hear this. I want to listen to my iPod. So then the mother gets frustrated and angry and sends him to his room for the night. And as if that's a consequence. But number one, that doesn't get the room clean. And number two, he's up there playing with his video games or on his computer. And so being in a room with electronics for these kids is not consequences. They just talk to their friends all night. So this is not an effective way to get the room clean or to deal with the kid who's disregarding you completely.
Adam, take that out, okay? We need to talk. We need to talk about your room. It's really a mess, and you agreed to pick it up when you got home from school.
I'll get to it.
You get to it. Well, you said that before, and I work, I know you know that, and I can't pick up after you. I can't do it. I don't have the time for all of that. So we need to make a plan about your room, and I've decided that there's no electronics until the room's picked up. No computer, no video games, no iPod. And another thing, no cell phone.
I don't friggin' care.
Well, it's not my problem that you don't care. We're still gonna have this rule, no electronics.
All right? Jeez, what are you, my friggin' prison warden? I'll do it. God!
So here we have a much better scenario. I like the way the mother doesn't get distracted by his attitude or later on by his name calling. She's got a focus here, and the focus is to get him to take his chores seriously, to get him to clean his room. She doesn't want to get stuck on he's looking for a fight. She doesn't want to get stuck fighting with him. She doesn't want to get stuck or misdirected. She wants the room clean. When she takes all the electronics, she's really setting up where he's going to be accountable now. All right, he can't use that stuff in his room. And so he's got 2 choices, sit there and pout and blame her and have a fight, or to clean. And if you notice, he starts calling her a warden and stuff. That's to have a fight. He'd rather fight than clean. He'd rather do anything than clean his room. Who knows why? But why doesn't matter. What matters is we want him to get his room done. We want him to get it clean. And we want to do that without a fight when possible. And I think the parent does that very effectively in this scenario. A lot of families have problems getting kids out of bed in the morning. Let's take a look at how one mother handles that.
times. You're gonna miss the bus. Adam, that's it. I'm sick of this. Day after day after day. Get up, get up. Listen, when you come home from school today, you are grounded for a week.
Get off me, I'm getting up, all right? Leave me alone.
You know, in this scenario, you can see that the mother takes it personally. She's already revving up as she walks up the stairs and down the hallway screaming this kid's name. She's frustrated, she's upset. And when you're frustrated and upset, that's not the time to deal effectively with kids. You know, you've got to calm down before you deal with these situations with kids because you're not effective. Not for any other reason, not good parent, bad parent, and all that stuff, but it's not effective. And that's the important thing to realize. And by the way, if you make a mistake, if you screw up, if you do get emotional with your kid, remember, the problem is it's not effective. It's not you're a bad parent or this or that. It has to do with effectiveness. You know, she gets in this power struggle, pulling the covers off him, and not getting up is a power struggle. When that kid refuses to get up on time to go to school, to take responsibility, he's in this little power struggle, this little you can't make me, I don't want to. And believe me, kids get addicted to their parents waking them up. They get addicted to it. The worst thing that you can do is to train your kid that you're gonna wake them up. In fact, I suggest to parents that you have kiddie alarm clocks. And you start alarm clocks very early. You know, if you want your little son to get, you know, your 5-year-old to get up at 8 o'clock, give him an alarm clock and show him how to set it. Don't expect him to set it. He won't be setting it till a few years later. But show him how it's set it up, so he understands that he's expected to respond to that alarm, that's his responsibility to do that. It's not your responsibility to come in and wake him. It's very important. Another thing that you may have noticed is that she grounds him for a week. Now, I don't understand how grounding him for a week solves the problem of him getting into power struggles in the morning and not getting out of bed. Those two do not jive. Let's say he stays grounded for a week. How does that give him the skills to get up tomorrow morning? How does that give him the motivation to get up tomorrow morning? He's grounded for a week anyway. What the heck? What are you gonna do, add on another week, make it a month? I think she needs to come up with a consequence that much more acutely focuses on his inability to get up and his tendency to get into power struggles.
Adam, let's talk about a few things, okay? The first thing is I wanted you to know I've noticed how your room looks, and I can tell you've picked it up more, so that's good. And there's something else I want to talk to you, which is about getting up on time. You know, I know it's been hard for you to get up and get ready and get on the bus on time, and it's affected me because I feel like I have to stay and keep reminding you, and, you know, that's not working out. So I want to have a different plan, and I've decided that your bedtime will be an hour earlier, and we'll see if that helps you get up earlier, okay? So starting tonight, you will go to bed an hour earlier, and we'll see if this will help you get up and be on time for school in the morning. And I was thinking, if you can go a week and be on time, getting up, you know, maybe we could talk about changing it back, okay? But only after this works out, okay? All right. Well, good job, Al.
God, you're a pain.
So let's look at how the parent deals with it differently this time, and I think a lot more effectively. You know, in a total transformation, we talk about ways to manage kids and ways to help them manage their behavior. And one of the concepts that we have is called hypodermic affection. You know, giving affection to strengthen a kid to then deal with another problem. I like the way this mother goes, I know you've been working on your room and it shows. You know, always say, I hear it, I see it. You know, those are important things to kids. It makes it more real. And she says, now let's look at you getting up in the morning. She doesn't say but. You know, when you say but to the kid, he starts shutting down immediately. You've been doing a good job, but. Imagine somebody come up to you saying at work, you've been doing a good job, but. Are you gonna relax or are you gonna be more tense? You know, we want the kid to relax. You've been doing a good job with your room, and now we have to talk about you getting up. I like the fact that the mother is doing it while they're in the evening. This is probably around dinner time. You know, the two of them are there together. She's not frustrated, she's not angry, and she connects the consequence to the behavior. He's not getting up. So what do you do when somebody doesn't get up? Why ground them to their room? That has nothing to do with it. Start sending them to bed early, all right? And the open agenda is no electronics. You start going to bed at 8 o'clock instead of 9 o'clock, or 9:30 instead of 10:30, or whatever the time frame is this week, and let's see how you get up. This is what we're doing. We're taking over and saying, okay, you're showing me you need more sleep. We're not dealing with the power struggle at all. You know, don't get sucked in. We don't have to attend every fight that we're invited to. We don't get sucked into power struggles unless we got something to gain from that, all right? There are things worth fighting about. This is not one of them. All right, so she says to the kid, you know, it seems like you're having a hard time getting up. So what I'm gonna do is let you go to bed earlier, send you to bed earlier, and let's see how that helps. Now, the kid's thinking, how's that gonna help? And frankly, between you and I, it may not help. But what we want is that kid to become motivated to get up on time. And what's gonna motivate him to get up on time is the loss of the things that he likes to do the hour before bedtime. Maybe he likes to go to his room and play video games. Maybe he likes to watch TV. Maybe he likes to sit in his room and listen to his iPod. He's lost all of that. He goes to bed at 9 o'clock and he has no electronics in his room. And what happens is he's missing something. Not getting up is costing him something. Of course, you know, there should be other things in compilation with this. Like sometimes if kids don't get up, you have to let them miss school. You have to let them feel the external consequences of that. You know, it's very important that we don't shield them and insulate them from the failure that they bring on themselves. And, you know, kids have to fail, kids have to stumble. We certainly have to protect them for their safety. We certainly have to protect them for their well-being. We don't have to protect them from failing in school. We don't have to protect them from getting detention because they've been late. These are natural consequences that kids have to feel. If we don't let them feel discomfort, if they don't learn how to feel pain, they're not going to know how to change. They're not going to be motivated to change, and they're really not going to be able to deal with the adult world as it's set up currently. As you can see from the video that we watched so far, parents are human. You know, parents make mistakes, they get frustrated. They say things that they wish they could take back. It doesn't happen all the time, but it doesn't happen that infrequently either. Parents work like dogs, they have busy lives, they have other kids they're dealing with, and they get very frustrated when kids mislead them or lie to them, or won't do simple responsibilities, won't follow through on things, or if they think the kid is acting unsafe and not taking care of themselves outside of the home. I think at those times, parents will overreact, and I think it's just part of being a parent. If you lose your temper, and I don't mean become abusive or assaultive, but I mean just lose your temper, get frustrated, yell, scream, take it personally, get into a power struggle, that's ineffective, and that's how I want you to look at it. It's not whether you're a good parent or a bad parent. Good parents yell. Good parents get into power struggles. Good parents make mistakes. We want to do what's effective. What are we trying to accomplish with this kid? So being an effective parent is not that you don't make these mistakes. Being an effective parent is learning what to do if you do overreact to a situation, learning what's effective and a way to get out of that. Certainly parents like to go back and say, I'm really sorry, and then they give the kid the excuses. I don't think that's helpful. I think you're doing to the kid exactly what you don't want the kid to do to you. I think there is a way to clean up a mistake, and it's very simple, and it should be heartfelt. Doesn't have to be, though. It just has to come across as serious or sincere.
Ryan, how did this happen?
What?
Your report card. It says you have 2 D's and 3 C's. You told me you've done all your homework, but this says you haven't handed in an assignment for a month. What is wrong with you?
I don't know.
You don't know? I don't want to see another one of these come into this house. Do you understand? You're grounded for a month.
I don't care.
You don't care. Fine. Let's make it 2 months.
Have you ever felt angry or frustrated with a kid who lies to you and doesn't meet responsibility and misleads you? I certainly have. I've gone through that as a parent. And I think that the way she handles that doesn't really address the problem. The problem is he's been dishonest, and the problem is he hasn't gotten his work done. And the consequences for not getting your work done is low grades. So what we want to see is higher grades. We don't get stuck on a dishonesty. You know, you should have a consistent consequence in your home for that kind of lying, so that there's a price to be paid, it's paid, and that's it. This shouldn't be made into a big moral issue, because it's not a moral issue for the adolescent. They're not at that level of moral development, frankly. In this case, we have a kid who's lied to defer the consequences, to put the consequences off. And now the mother has to bring that home to roost. You and I both know grounding him for a month and then for 2 months is nothing but pure frustration and anger on her part. She's reacting right along with it. And in fact, if you look at that video again, what you'll see is he's in control, not her. She's losing control. He's saying, I don't know, I don't care, whatever. And she's escalating and escalating and escalating. That's completely the reverse of what we want. If anybody loses control, let it be him. There's a new learning situation there. We want to be calm and in control. We want to know what we want to accomplish and then set up a structure that accomplishes that.
Ryan, turn the TV off. Let's talk about what happened this afternoon. I was very disappointed to find out you had lied to me about your homework assignments. And now you have C's and D's on your report card. So you are grounded, but you're not grounded for 2 months. You are grounded until you bring home a progress report that says you've brought your grades up to at least a B. And I need you to leave the door to your bedroom open when you're doing your homework. And no music on. I need to see you doing it.
As you can see, the parent begins with an I statement. So she's not saying you lied, although she does mention that, and she should. But she says, I was disappointed. That's an important thing to say. We want to teach kids how to say I, not you. Whenever they say you, they're pointing the finger and blaming, and it doesn't solve the problem. I cannot solve your problem. I can only solve my problem. So mom says, I got frustrated when you lied to me. Really good. She owns it. She doesn't get into a big I'm sorry and all of this stuff and an explanation. You know, you don't explain these things over and over and over again. That's just hoping kids will understand so that you're off the hook. You know, you've got to feel the pressure of holding kids accountable. You've got to be their boss. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people. Supervising others is uncomfortable for people. And sometimes it comes out in these kind of explosive situations between parent and child. So she sits down and calmly says to him, look, I was wrong. I got frustrated when you lied. And the 2 months is not effective. It's not going to help you. So that's not how long you're going to be grounded for. And then she says explicitly and clearly what the consequences are. You are grounded until you come home with B's on your midterm report or your quarterly report.